Parliamentary Republica Moldova, the Moldovan Parliament. A parliamentary election that's very important for Moldova, very important for what future path Moldova is going to take. It's a very interesting geopolitical situation that Moldova is in. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Chisinau, Moldova. We're back in Chisinau, and another cold day here in Chisinau. We're out on the streets today, and we're actually right across from two very important buildings. One, the Parliament building of Chisinau. There it is, Parliamentary Republica Moldova, the Moldovan Parliament. And across the street, that is, behind the trees there, the Presidential Palace. So we are in sort of the center of Chisinau, and I wanted to start this video from here, right next to the Parliament building, because we arrived here just before a very important election, a parliamentary election that's very important for Moldova, very important for what future path Moldova is going to take. And while we're here in Chisinau, the election now has already taken place, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my thoughts about it, the results, and a little bit more about the political situation here in Moldova, because it is quite complicated. So come along. Thanks for clicking on the video. If you want to help out the channel and help it grow, I really would appreciate it. Click on the like button down there, the subscribe button, and the little bell next to it to be notified for when new videos drop. It really helps the channel grow because it's going to help the YouTube algorithm recognize this content and spread it to other YouTube viewers. If you'd like to support the channel monetarily, I would appreciate that as well. You can leave a super thanks by clicking this thanks button here and give a small donation to the channel. I appreciate your support. So back to the video, enjoy. So the Parliament election, the election in Parliament happened right here at the very end of September. Like I said, we arrived just before it happened. And it's a very important election. It's an election that's actually gotten a lot of international press, as well as being a very important election here in Moldova. Now, Moldova is not the biggest country. It is kind of a small country. It doesn't get a lot of news coverage in the United States. And I even had friends and family of mine contacting me because they knew that I was here in Moldova and saying, hey, I saw something on the evening news about Moldova, like the national US evening news, or that they've been reading news stories about Moldova and about the elections here. And so when Moldova, a news story from Moldova breaks and gets its way into the news, nightly news, and into publications in the United States, you know it's a big deal. And this election is a very big deal. It's a very big deal for a number of reasons, both locally here to Moldova and also internationally, because this is it's a very interesting geopolitical situation that Moldova is in. Here we are as we walk right in front of the Moldovan Parliament building, and you can see it's a very nice building, and like I said, very important election. And now that the election is over, I want to talk a little bit about my thoughts on the results, but also we need to learn a little bit more about the political situation in Moldova. Let's do that now. So first thing to say is Moldovan politics is extremely complicated. Just want to give you enough information that you understand the players and why this current election is so important and why it turned out the way that it did. It's important to note that a lot of the divisions in Moldovan politics and society go back all the way to, like in many post-Soviet republics, the fall of the Soviet Union, a war that broke out shortly afterwards, and that resulted in a breakaway republic, a de facto state of Transnistria that is in eastern Moldova, bordering Ukraine. Transnistria is not internationally recognized really by any country, not even Russia, who supports financially and militarily the de facto government in Transnistria. Still, the people of Transnistria do vote in elections in Moldova, so it is important to note that even though Transnistria is, for all intents and purposes, a separatist, completely separatist territory from Moldova, they still vote in Moldovan elections. It's also important to note here that the terms that you may know if you're from the United States or Western Europe, as far as left-wing and right-wing, and what maybe the party policies are going to be of left-wing parties and right-wing parties, are going to be completely flipped and very different in Moldova because of its unique history. Whereas in the current political state, most often you find right-wing parties being socially conservative and economically liberal, meaning neoliberal economic policies, and also specifically on the issue of the Russia-Ukraine war, many right-wing politicians, both in the United States and Western Europe, tend to support Russia more in that conflict than Ukraine, whereas more center and left-wing politicians and political parties tend to support Ukraine. In Moldova, this is basically flipped. The left-wing parties, the Communist Party of Moldova, the Socialist Party of Moldova, that are basically holdovers from the Soviet Union, they actually tend to be much closer to Russia and support the country and the government moving closer to having ties with Russia than the European Union. They are also very socially conservative, which, like I said, is very different from what you would expect if you were from Western Europe or the United States, where left-wing parties are very socially liberal and right-wing parties are socially conservative. And here in Moldova, the center-right party, the PAS, Party of Action and Solidarity, is pushing for Moldova to join the European Union. While they are a more right-wing party that is anti-Russian, they are also more socially liberal. They are closer in makeup and party platform to the Democratic Party in the United States. You following me here? Now, if we go back about 10 years in history in Moldova, in 2015 and 2016, there were some major protests in Moldova, anti-government protests. They're sort of known as the Moldovan Euromaidan, reference to the Euromaidan protests in Ukraine from a few years earlier. And these protests had, there were protest groups from both sides of the political spectrum, both pro-European parties and pro-Russian parties, all of whom were protesting corruption in the government. It's important because from these protests emerged the two major political blocs in this current election: the PAS, the Party of Action and Solidarity, led by current President Maia Sandu, and the Patriot Electoral Bloc, led by former President Igor Dodon. Very briefly, the Party of Action and Solidarity was created out of these protests with an anti-corruption message and is pro-European, meaning that the PAS wants Moldova to eventually become part of the European Union. The Patriot Electoral Bloc is a bloc that was formed recently in 2025, but its roots derive from earlier blocs that were blocs to unite the socialist and communist parties along with some other socially conservative parties, pro-Russian parties in Moldovan government. So basically, the PAS, Maia Sandu's party, is the pro-European but more center-right-wing economically party, and the Patriot Electoral Bloc is a pro-Russian, economically left-wing but socially conservative electoral bloc. Very important to note, the PAS, like I mentioned, has had success in recent elections, including Maia Sandu's election, the parliamentary election, and Maia Sandu's re-election. But the elections have been plagued with corruption, including a lot of very organized campaigns of Russian electoral interference. So much so that there has been widespread vote-buying campaigns in which people are paid to vote a specific way. Interestingly, with my tourist temporary prepaid Moldovan SIM card in my phone, I immediately started receiving texts from the Moldovan government, mass texts that reminded me that selling my vote is illegal and that I could face a stark fine if I were to sell my vote. So hopefully that gave you a better understanding of the political situation here in Moldova and exactly why this election was so important and why it's become big international news. Now, the result of the election, you probably already know, if you pay attention to things like this. The PAS party, the Partido Acțiune și Solidaritate, the Party of Action and Solidarity, Maya Sandu, the president's party, they won. And they won the election with quite a large margin of victory. They won 50.4, I believe, % of the vote, just over 50% of the vote. And they will end up with, well, they've already ended up with now, actually, when you're seeing this video, 55 out of the 101 seats in the parliament. So they have a parliamentary majority, which basically means they don't have to form a coalition government. They don't have to really sacrifice or make any compromises on their governmental plans and their plan to move forward with continuing to move closer to joining the European Union. So it's actually quite a big deal here in Moldova, mainly because this election was kind of like, I don't know, it was predicted to be a lot closer. And if you had followed the news leading up to it, and from what I learned from some people I spoke to here in Moldova, some Moldovans, they told me that they thought it was going to be closer. And the fact that the PAS was able to win a majority is quite a big deal. It's quite a big deal. Because not only does it, like I said, allow them to move forward without having to create a coalition government, it also is kind of like the third in a row where the third election in a row where the PAS party has done extremely well. Maya Sandu's election, her first election as president, and the parliamentary election that went with that, where they secured a majority of parliament, and then her re-election, and then also this campaign. It's 3 in a row, basically, where the Party of Action and Solidarity, the PAS, has performed very, very well and obtained a majority. So they're like firmly in control of the government now. And I think that, I don't know, my thoughts about it moving forward, I think that it is generally a good thing that they are in control of the government. They seem to me to be leading in a direction that I think is going to be beneficial for Moldova, and that in the long run will be something that secures, or that helps to secure, Moldova's economic future, as well as like their geopolitical and military future as well. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention when I was talking about the politics of Moldova, I mentioned it a little bit, how they're situated between Europe and Russia geographically, politically, and financially as well. But when Russia launched their full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, about a week or two after, a photograph was released. It was a photograph of some of Putin's generals, like showing off, I guess explaining in a meeting or something, their plans. And there was a map behind them, a map of the grand war plan for the invasion. And some people noticed, if you looked down into like southwestern Ukraine in Odessa, which is like right next to Moldova, you noticed there was an invasion of Odessa, which showed some arrows moving from Odessa towards Moldova, towards Transnistria, the aforementioned separatist province here in Moldova. So I actually misremembered this. It wasn't Russian generals speaking to Putin. It was a video of a speech that was being given by Alexander Lukashenko, and Lukashenko was the one standing in front of the map. Lukashenko is the president of Russia's ally, Belarus, but you can see here in the picture clearly on the map from Odessa here on the coast, there is a big red arrow pointing towards Moldova. And so that was the goal. If Russia had attained its goals in the invasion of Ukraine, its initial goals of bull rushing all the way to Kyiv, toppling the government, putting a puppet government in place, their plan was to continue the push and invade Moldova next. So you can see why it is such a big issue here, whether the party in charge is a pro-Russian party or whether the party in charge is a pro-European party, and which direction Moldova is trying to move. But beyond the issue, the larger issue, the geopolitical issue of Russian influence, there are just regular kitchen table issues also that concern Moldovans here in the election, just like there would be in any other country having an election. In fact, we're standing right here in front of this building. This is the Hotel National. The Hotel National, and this is an old Soviet-era hotel, which is abandoned actually, and has been abandoned here in Chisinau for many, many years. It's kind of become like a symbol and an eyesore, but a very iconic symbol of Chisinau, because, like I said, it's been abandoned. It used to be like the premier hotel in the city during the Soviet era, and now it's been abandoned for many, many years. And in fact, this hotel was made sort of a little more famous in recent times, maybe about 6 years ago. Another travel YouTuber who you may be familiar with, named Bald and Bankrupt, came here and did a few videos from here in Moldova, and he featured this hotel. And he mentioned about how the hotel was abandoned, and how also over here on a nearby underground underpass, a pedestrian underpass that goes under the street in order to walk to the other side, he criticized that the steps were broken. The steps were they were all messed up. They were all broken. The wheelchair ramp that goes along with the steps were broken, and he complained about that. But he put the onus on the government, saying hey, what are you doing? This should be like the high street of your city, and you can't even shell out some money to fix the steps. And of course, there are economic issues here in Chisinau, but he later in that video went on to blame the problems on political corruption. He found a row of posters of politicians on a wall and said, look, this is the reason, all of these corrupt politicians is the reason why they don't fix things around here and why the people have it so rough. And to a certain extent, he was right. But as you can see, in the 6 years or so since that video, they have fixed the steps here. They have fixed the wheelchair ramp, and it looks quite nice. Now, did they do it in reaction to that video? Did they make this underground tunnel, this pedestrian passage, look so nice in reaction to that video? Who knows? What is most important though in the situation is that the steps got fixed, and even in just a small way, the material living situation for residents of Chisinau, for citizens of Moldova who have to use these steps every day, they got better. So the government did actually do something to improve the lives of its citizens. And I think that's something you have to remember when we're talking about all of this. We're talking about grand geopolitical situation, the looming threat of Russian interference, and all of that. We should still remember that a government's main job should be to improve the lives of its citizens, and they're going to have to do that as well. They can't just run on being the anti-Russian, pro-European party for forever. The PAS is going to have to make material improvements to society, and they have in a lot of ways. They fixed these steps as an example, but also the economic indexes and corruption indexes, as far as statistically, are headed in the right direction here in Moldova under the PAS. So I think this is a really good metaphor. The National Hotel there, that's been, just abandoned here, left over from the Soviet era. It's like the looming specter of Russian political interference, geopolitical interference here. It's still there. It's always there every time you walk by, but there are still lots of people who just want the steps to be fixed. And the PAS moving forward with their new electoral mandate, they're going to have to do both things. They're going to have to address the big problems, the big geopolitical issues, and also the smaller kitchen table issues. Smaller in scale, but definitely not smaller in importance to the average citizen here in Moldova. Across the street right here is the last remaining part of the Republican Stadium here in Chisinau. And this is an abandoned stadium that was built here in 1952 in the Soviet era. It's an old Soviet relic, and the building itself is abandoned. It's been abandoned since 2007 when the stadium was torn down. If we cross the street here, you can see that behind the stadium, there's really nothing left. Some of the rooms here, broken windows. And if you look over the fence, it's just basically an empty lot that's been overgrown now for almost 20 years. Like the Hotel National that we saw earlier in the video, just a leftover relic of the Soviet era. And I think it's one of the major things that strikes me about the political situation here in Moldova right now is there's two sides. One of them is continuously looking to the past, to the Soviet era and the glory, well, now faded glory of the Soviet Union. And thinking of better times in the past. But it's been more than 30 years now since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And even though this stadium behind me was a great and glorious achievement, I mean, this stadium seated 100,000 people. Millions of people came through here watching different competitions, different athletic events. But now, it's just abandoned. It's just an overgrown lot. What really makes this stand out to me is right across the street is the Casa de Cultura, the House of Culture of Moldova, Chisinau. It's an interesting situation that you have here in Moldova. There's two sides of the political spectrum, both of which are fighting over what is the future of the identity of the culture of Moldova going to be. Is it going to be tied to Russia and the former Soviet past, or is it going to be tied to Europe and the European future? Moldova sits in the middle of a power struggle between two powers, Europe on one side, Russia on the other side. And yet, Moldovans are still in the middle. For the last more than 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union, they've been trying to define their own identity. You know, what is it to be Moldovan? What is Moldovan culture? What's a Moldovan identity? They're lofty questions, very lofty questions, and questions I think are going to be continuously asked throughout the future here in Moldova. But if the last three elections here in Moldova are of any significance, it it seems like Moldovans have chosen the path pretty clearly that they're looking towards Europe, and they're looking away from their past associations with Russia. And of course, that brings with it a whole host of other problems that they're going to have to grapple with here in Moldova. You know, the 3 elections in a row of choosing the PAS as a majority party doesn't mean that the PAS have accomplished all of their goals. Ultimately, they would like Moldova to be integrated into the European Union. And that is something that's going to take, frankly, several more years here. And who knows? Who knows what can happen, geopolitically speaking, over the course of several years. But as it stands right now, after the September election here in 2025 in Moldova, it seems like, for right now at least, Moldova is headed towards Europe and looking to the future, a future in the European Union. Anyway, I know this is a little bit of a complex subject. For some people, might be a little bit boring, but something that I find really, really interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's more coming from here in Chisinau, in Moldova, so stay tuned for that. We'll see you in the next one.